Nightwing Annual 2022. We got Tom Taylor and Eduardo Pansica on the main story. Obviously, there's other teams on the others, but we'll get into the Nightwing Annual here.
This main story for the origin of Heartless, which I had seen Tom Taylor talk about writing the last issue of Nightwing with Nightmite, and this back to back almost gave him whiplash because the tones. I was not ready for this origin of Heartless to be what it was, and I kind of love it for that.
It's this dark story of so we're basically getting this narration from a butler, and for us, maybe a split second, you're like, wait, is this like flashing back to when Alfred first met the Waynes or something? And it's not that at all. So this butler comes to this house of this family, Chamberlain, and we find out just a couple pages in, after we see their kid trying to kill his cat, which by the way, F you, kid, like you're instantly on my shit list. But we get this quick flashback that shows us that no, the real guy who was supposed to be the butler was killed by this imposter on the boat on the way here, because this guy was fleeing London. Had this been set, another 50, 60 years prior, or maybe more than that, I'd have been like, is this guy Jack the Ripper? Is that what they're getting at? Because he says, oh, people are looking for me in London. But he specifically says London though, and I was like, you know what? That's Jack the Ripper vibes. It's the wrong time period, so it's definitely not. But it tickled my brain. But anyway, so it's like, okay, so this serial killer is impersonating this butler, and his plan was to get himself in the will of this family and then kill them all. That was what he was going to do. But he finds this kid who is a serial killer in the making. This kid, is kind of like a young Dexter who is fascinated by death and butchering animals, and
he feels a kinship with this kid.
This is
so creepy. Creepy.
This is like Jack the Ripper like running into a 10-year-old Michael Myers and being like,
bro, I was just gonna say Michael Myers.
I could train you.
Because that's what the kid is, because this butler character is constantly saying how the kid doesn't really it acts like no one's there, right? And it isn't until the kid sees something that it makes it click. Yeah, because I was getting Michael Myers vibes for sure.
Yeah, behind the parents' back, he's taking the kid to like a butcher shop to see a pig be gutted. He takes him to a zoo to see feeding time. But it's not until they happen to go to the circus and young Heartless, this kid, who obviously the kid's Heartless, right? If that wasn't obvious. The kid witnesses the death of the Graysons, because this is one of the things I was a little worried, because the first page, it's this the big page of the Graysons falling off the wire, and I was thinking, oh god, like Taylor, don't you try and retcon like Heartless into the backstory
to Zuko or whatever.
Yeah, like I really didn't want that. But the idea that he was just like in the audience and just saw it, and that was like a big deal for him, because he like this was the first time he saw like a human die, and then
he craves death.
Well, it's not even just that; it's the pain on Dick's like face. It's like seeing this kid distraught because he's just lost his parents. Like the panel I'm looking at right now, where his eyes are like white, he's smiling and his eyes are lighting up. Like it's like, oh, and then he talks for the first time, and he talks about how great it was seeing someone be in pain, that they just lost their parents in front of them.
The line too is like, did you see them hit the ground? And you're like, geez, kid, like, hooey.
And he's so proud. Like the butler is like, yeah, like
sociopath. Yeah.
Don't tell your parents about this. It actually ties into to a flashback from an earlier issue.
Yeah. So you find out that this kid's dad works for or owns an insurance company. And that the insurance company makes tons of money because he's constantly denying people care, right? And then we get to the flashback, and so did I pull up my issue of Nightwing 78 to double check all of this? You bet your sweet butt I did.
Well, this is the thing. I had this weird moment of, because it's like he's a bit older. He's in middle school or whatever. And there's a scene where he's being bullied by, or he's kind of like the ringleader now, and he's like got these other kids bullying someone, and this redheaded girl walks up, and I'm like, this seems familiar. My gut is telling me that's Babs as a kid. And then next page it's Dick, and then there's like an editor's note saying, hey, see how this played out in full in Nightwing. I was like, yeah, this was a flashback to like Dick when he was stopping a bully.
And I like that though it's from young Heartless's point of view, But then when you go and read, 78,
Mm.
it's all Dick's point of view and how he dealt with it. So it's a very like kind of Rashomon thing of the way that we see it here. It's still the kid was being a bully because that's what he likes, right? He likes to make people feel bad. But when you see it from Dick's point of view, it's very much this superhero-y kind of trope of him moving quickly and whatever, whereas here it's all very kind of passive. It's real fun. This is why I like Tom Taylor as a writer, because you can tell he's always trying to tinker with things.
Yeah, but because the kid's actually talking to his parents now and acting a bit more normal, at least pretending to be, he actually gets put in his parents' will finally, which I would have thought he would have been in their will anyway, but I guess they were being stingy up until this point.
Yep.
I actually love this, that the butler planted a bomb in the parents' helicopter, but didn't intend for the kid to be there. So this idea that he almost murdered his protege and then was pulling him out of the wreckage saying sorry, and it led to the surgery where he had to get a heart transplant and all the rest of it. This was the idea that this brutal killer actually cared about this young kid protege because he saw some beautiful serial killer in him and almost murdered him by accident and panicked because he thought he'd killed him and then was relieved to save him. And that's why, because we've seen him have this butler in the future, in the present day, where he's there for him. He's the one swapping his hearts out for him. He's so on. So this set all this up, and so it tells you a story where he got his arms replaced to be strong. He's got the heart, and then eventually, this idea that maybe the blockbuster heart is the first heart that's going to be big enough to actually not need replaced because it's going to be powerful enough to actually deal with all of his enhancements and stuff like that. But
I do like that the idea that he is kind of like Tony Stark without the arc reactor, is that he needs a strong heart in order to power all the enhancements. And so it finally comes to wanting, needing blockbusters in order to work. I thought that was a fun little twist.
Yeah, but I think it's important though that he liked causing pain and killing people before he needed a heart, because I think it becomes this metaphor that he enjoys the pain he causes, not just physically, but he enjoys the pain he causes in the loved ones. So we even see his Heartless. He takes out a homeless guy's heart, and the kids are there. And I think this may even be the kids that we saw back in the first arc of the run. But it's this metaphor that he's literally taking hearts. He's causing heartache to people. So it's setting up that he and he knows Nightwing's Dick Grayson seemingly, because the final line is the butler, as he's putting in Blockbuster's heart, says, "You're going to get to watch Dick Grayson lose everything again." This idea that he is obsessed with Dick Grayson because Dick Grayson's pain over his parents' death was the thing that kind of started his real love of this type of torture.
Right. Which even if he doesn't know that Dick's Nightwing, Dick is still a public figure that's trying to change Bloodhaven for the better. And so that's the ultimate thing. If he can take away him making Bloodhaven for the better, that's his ultimate win. And so I like that it works on different levels too. It's we always say that Dick's the heart of the DCU, right? And so what happens when Heartless tries to break him?
And there's also a nice little touch here as well of Batman's always been obsessed with his parents' death. I love the idea that Dick's new arch nemesis is the one obsessed with Dick's parents' death, not Dick himself.
Right.
It means, obviously it still means something to Dick, but it almost means more to Heartless.
Yeah, it does, because it's Heartless's inciting incident, right?
It's
in the same way that Bruce's parents dying is his inciting incident that started him on that thing. Same for Heartless. Yeah,
it's just like if you're a foot fetish, that first time you saw someone's feet and you went, "Oh, this has awoken something in me."
God, Pete. I understand why you went there, but you didn't have to.
Yes. No, the main story here, this origin of Heartless was great. It was essential to the run, so I would say this annual is actually really important for the run.
Well, and just the way that this is, one story and the other, and then there's two more. This tells me this almost could have been issue whatever is next, and we just would have stopped what we were doing and gotten the origin of Heartless, and it would have fit in.
Yeah, I mean this could have just been a regular issue, and perhaps it was just okay, they want an annual. I'll just put this fairly standalone story into the annual, and then there can be some backups.
This story is definitely getting included in the trade whenever it comes out, and probably in order on top of it. So yeah,
I imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's really, really good. It is a perfect, like, I don't want to say, like, because to me Bruce really doesn't have that perfect villain, because all the villains are kind of aspects of Gotham. But here with Heartless and Dick, it really is the yin to his yang, and I really love that. I really love that Taylor has worked with this, and that it's a rich kid that felt entitled to things, whereas Dick is this kid that came onto, wealth, and is just trying to do right by Bloodhaven and Gotham and the world and of itself.
I think the majority of the world would disagree with you that Batman doesn't have like a main arch nemesis. But
I'm not gonna say that. I'm talking about one that is so like his opposite, right? Like, I don't feel like Joker is Batman's complete opposite.
He absolutely is. What are you talking about? Order versus chaos, light versus dark, dour and moody versus happy, and
I don't know. I take that as a compliment for Batman, is that he has such a rich rogues gallery that there's multiple.
Yeah, he absolutely does. Yeah, but
so there's not just the one that comes to mind, because to me his opposite is Talia al Ghul. So in the way that it's Heartless and Dick in that way. So which I felt like Dick really didn't have that. Like, Blockbuster was like one of his main villains for a while, but it never felt like there was this emotional tie to it. So to see this stuff with Heartless, I definitely feel like Dick has a good addition to his rogues gallery here.
Yeah. It's nice, between, obviously we had Raptor from Rebirth, then we got Heartless. Obviously Blockbuster's always been a recurring villain. It's nice that there is a bit of a gallery forming for Dick in some way. But yeah, well, I mean, it remains to be seen if he sort of stands the test of actually feeling like the true nemesis, because I do think Joker is Batman's like big true nemesis in the same way that Lex, no matter how many Zods and Metallos you throw at Superman, Lex is always going to be the main arch nemesis of Superman. The Rogues are obviously great in the Flash, but I think Reverse Flash is always going to be seen as the, Sinestro is always going to be the Green Lantern one, even though he's kind of more of an anti-hero now, but whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it feels nice that Dick's finally growing that, because for the longest time, it almost felt like Batman's shadow was his greatest nemesis. And now I feel like we're finally out of that, and Dick's being able to stand on his own and, have people like Heartless and even Blockbuster. And I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that have popped up, but I'm drawing a blank. I mean, I would argue Rick Grayson is probably his biggest threat, but that's me. So Dan Didio. No, Dan Didio is his arch nemesis in the way that Barbados is.
I mean, we've made that joke many times before. Yes. Let's not pretend.
Yeah, it's fun. He doesn't have a job anymore, so it doesn't matter.
So the second story is called Night Out. It is Jay Kristoff writing with Eduardo Pansica again on the art, bizarrely. So this is... I was wondering what the hell was going on in this, because it's, so Babs like surprises Dick with like, let's go out for a date kind of thing. He gets dressed, and Haley the dog is upset that Dick's leaving, and while Babs and Dick are out, a team of villains attack, but it's like an old school Catwoman, and like Poison Ivy's a villain here. I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Ivy and Freeze working with them, and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, two of these characters have not been villains really in a long time. What's going on? But it turns out this is all just a dream, or this is like all the fantasy that that Haley's having, where Haley shows up to see. You think it's Batman from the skylight, but it's actually Haley in a different Nightwing outfit that she had in the last, the Nightmate story. She's got like a Nightwing like sort of outfit on, and saves the day. And obviously it becomes clear that it's just the dog's dream, because she's getting praised as a good doggo. Like the mayor's, Dick's sister's like, Haley's the best doggo, and her initial cat day has been cancelled because Haley's when
I was reading, I was like, what is going on? Like, I know it's not Tom Taylor writing, but man, this writing's kind of like, and then when you realize it's the dog's point of view, it really clicks in, because Dick also says that every time that he leaves Haley, she has separation anxiety and tears up his apartment. you know. And so you see at the end when he comes back, you know, all of
Yeah.
the stuff that she's chewed up is kind of represented of the little adventure she had in her
Yeah,
head.
basically, she was imagining this happening, and she was like tearing things apart with her teeth as if she was fighting bad guys. Like that's.
Oof. Also, going back and looking through Nightwing 78, that's where she first comes up, and her introduction is still so heartbreaking. And it's like, if I didn't love Dick Grayson as much as I did, him rescuing a three-legged dog on top of it is just enough, you know. But yeah, I forgot how I don't want to say brutal, but jarring that is, because right after, you know, when you get introduced to her, she's on the run from this group of miscreants. So but yeah, it's a fun little story. Like, definitely this feels like it's an annual story.
It's an annual backup. There's no denying that, but it's kind of sweet at the end when you realize what it's actually been.
Yep.
Yeah, the dog does actually destroy both a Nintendo Switch and a PS5 controller. I noticed on that page where they find her. Those PS5 controllers are like, you know, $60-$70, Matt. That's a pricey mistake.
He's a billionaire though, so it'll be fine. He can.
Yeah,
it's nothing.
So then the last story here is The Lesson. This is written by C.S. Pacat and art by Inaki Miranda. And this is basically a story of John coming to Aztec for help to be trained, because this is after he's accidentally hurt someone and he wants to learn to control himself and not do that anymore. And you see some scenes of like Batman training Dick when he was a kid. And the whole point of the story, more than anything, is just to show how Dick learned from Batman, but he's learned to do the opposite of what Batman did when he was training him. So we see Batman saying, "Don't trust anyone, no practice, do it over and over again, get up." And then the very next panel is like, "No, learn to trust people, John. And this is why you do this." And then
it shows that Dick Grayson's very coachable, right? Because he learned from Batman of what works and what doesn't. Now he knows what works with John, you know, and it shows his mentorship here. Which again, I always love that. Like, I love that you know, Superman was also Dick's mentor in a way that Bruce wasn't, because Bruce is like his dad figure. Where Superman got to be like cool uncle that you learn stuff from, that like takes you fishing and, you know, shows you how to tie a knot in the line and whatever. And now Dick gets to repay that with, you know, his cousin, and be his cousin's mentor.
Yeah, and it just sort of ends with almost like a kind of a heartfelt punchline, which is John saying, you know, "Where did you learn to train? You're very good at this, you know, as a teacher." And he says, "I learned it from Batman." And then, you know, the last panel is Batman lifting Dick up off the ground, saying again. And it's just this kind of, you know, dichotomy of like the differences between the characters. And, you know, I guess I appreciate that the backup stories kind of tried to focus on different things that this run has been making important to Dick. One being the dog and Bab's relationship with him, but also one being that he is this mentor for John, and that's been something that's been brought up in, you know, both Nightwing and Superman Son of Kal-El. So I appreciate the idea that John and him are friends, and that Dick's kind of like a big brother to him is kind of sweet, and I appreciate that. The story itself, you know, it's just a lot of jokes while they're training about how quick John's doing things because he's got super speed and stuff like that. There's not much to it. So I mean, the two backups, they feel like backups, so they're not really, I wouldn't say they're that must read, but the main story is worth reading, and they're decent enough reads to follow up it. So
yeah, I would say that the main story, even though it is a typical length, is kind of worth the price on the cover in and of itself, because it seems like it's a crucial piece of the arc. So, but yeah, the backups, I've definitely read worse backups in annuals.
Yeah,
you know, at least these have the tone of what Taylor's Nightwing's been doing, even though he didn't write the backups. So
yeah, that basically sums it up. But the main story is really good and is essential to the run, and the backups are fun for what they are, and you know. So, what are you giving Nightwing Annual 2022?
I'm gonna give this one an 8.5, and I know that seems crazy because I already said about backups, but I enjoyed that heartless story that much, and the Vincenka art. You know,
I mean, if you love the main story, I think it's fair to say the backups don't factor into the rating that much.
Yeah.
So, I would also agree with the 8.5. I think, because the backup, the main story is so good, and the backups are solid for what they are.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I was separating it, it'd be like 8.5 for the main story, and then the backups are like, they're both fine 7s or thereabouts.
7, 6.5, around that.